Hi everyone and welcome to our bite-sized training on peer abuse. I'm Hayley Cameron, Education Safeguarding Manager at Cognos, and I'm here with another member of my team, Steve.
Hello everybody, my name is Steve Welding and I'm part of the Education Safeguarding team here at Cognos. So today we're talking about peer abuse, and as we start, we're just going to look at some of the key legislation that is out there, which covers all safeguarding, including peer abuse, harmful sexual behaviours, which are on the left there. You can see sexual violence and sexual harassment between children and in schools and colleges. The most up-to-date version is September 2021. And in the middle there, you've got keeping children safe in education. Again, the new September 21 document. What links those two documents together is the Working Together to Safeguard Children, July 2018. And on the far right is for our early years. So from birth to 5 years old, they have the statutory framework for the early years foundation stage. Again, the up-to-date version is the September 2021. And we all work to the London Child Protection Procedures 6th edition, which you can find online.
Okay, so sexual violence and sexual abuse can happen anywhere, and all staff working with children are advised to maintain an attitude of it could happen here, and it does happen here. Schools and colleges should be aware of and respond appropriately to all reports and concerns, including those outside the school or college or online.
So let's look at some of the definitions here. We've got peer abuse, which is any kind of abuse between peers, but has come to refer to sexual abuse. We also have sexual violence and sexual harassment, specifically sexual abuse across a spectrum of behaviours, and we have harmful sexual behaviours. These are the developmental, inappropriate sexual behaviours displayed by children, which may be harmful or abusive.
So with peer abuse, children can abuse other children, and that's often referred to as peer abuse, and it can take many forms. It can happen both inside and outside of school and college and online, as we previously stated, and it's important that all staff recognise the indicators and signs of peer abuse and know how to identify it and to respond to it. This can include, so with peer abuse, it can include, but is not limited to, bullying, including cyberbullying, prejudice-based and discriminatory bullying, abuse within intimate partner relationships, physical abuse such as hitting, kicking, shaking, biting, hair pulling, or otherwise causing physical harm, sexual violence and sexual harassment, consensual and non-consensual sharing of nude and semi-nude images and/or videos, causing someone to engage in sexual activity without consent, such as forcing someone to strip, touch themselves sexually, or to engage in sexual activity with a third party, upskirting and initiation, hazing type violence and rituals, addressing inappropriate behaviour, even if it appears to be relatively innocuous, can be an important intervention that helps prevent problematic, abusive and/or violent behaviour in the future.
So when we talk about this, it's important to know the difference between sexual violence and what is sexual harassment as well. So just to describe on this one, so when referring to sexual violence, we're referring to sexual violence offences under the Sexual Offences Act of 2003. And they're kind of the rape, your assault by penetration, and your sexual assaults. Now, sexual harassment is likely to violate a child's dignity or make them feel intimidated or degraded or humiliated or create a hostile, offensive or sexualized environment. And this can be done by sexual comments, sexual jokes and remarks, deliberately brushing against somebody else, interfering with their clothing, I don't know, flipping bra straps, lifting up skirts, that type of thing. And of course, we've got the upskirting, the sharing sexual images and sexual bullying, which Hayley mentioned on the previous slide. So again, sexual violence and sexual harassment. Again, if sexual violence can occur between two children of any age and sex from primary through to secondary stage and into colleges. It can occur through a group of children sexually assaulting or sexually harassing a single child or a group of children. Sexual violence and sexual harassment exist on a continuum and may overlap. They can occur online, face to face, both physically and verbally, and are never acceptable. As set out in part 1 of Keeping Children Safe in Education, all staff working with children are advised to maintain an attitude of "it could happen here." So if we look at, we thought it'd be quite interesting to look at some of the statistics which have been looked at over the last couple of years. So in the year ending March 2019, the police recorded 73,260 sexual offences where there are data to identify the victim was a child. Around 1/4 of these were rape offences. These totals are likely to be significantly underrepresented over the true number of offences against young people of this age group. And police recorded crime data, both in England and Wales, for the year ending March 2020, indicates that over 50% of female victims and 60% of male victims of sex offences were aged between 5 and 19. So the statistics really are quite, dreadful, really. And the NSPCC, How Safe Are Your Children? The report in 2020 found that girls are particularly vulnerable to sexual abuse, accounting for around 90% of victims of recorded rape offences against 13 to 15-year-olds in England, Wales and Scotland. And the Women and Equalities Committee state that a number of large-scale surveys found that girls are consistently reporting high levels of sexual harassment and sexual violence in our schools and colleges. Then if we look at the Girl Guiding of 2021, they did a survey, found that over 67% of girls and young women aged 13 to 18 who were surveyed have experienced sexual harassment at school from another student, and that 29% first experienced sexual harassment when they were just 11 to 13 years old. And 1/4 of those surveyed are female students, and 4% of male students at mixed sex schools have been subjected to unwanted physical touching of a sexual nature while at school.
Okay, so some more figures here. So 33% of perpetrators of child sexual abuse are under 18, which is why we thought it was a really important topic to discuss today. And the most prevalent forms of harmful sexual behaviours between students, 73% sexual sexist name calling, 55% rumours about students' sexual activity, 36% sexual harassment, 30% sharing images without consent, and 22% unwanted touching. And the guidance that we have about peer-on-peer abuse and sexual violence and sexual harassment between children, Steve's already mentioned them already, but it's really important that you're aware of both documents. They give very clear guidelines on what to do, how to report, what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable. And all of this really has come to a head, I would say, through the development of the Everyone's Invited website. And again, with the website, there were absolutely just thousands and thousands of testimonials from people reporting historic sexual abuse in schools. Some schools were named, some schools were not. Again, very difficult to see what was malicious and what wasn't. But there was a very intense review carried out, and it's kind of changed everyone's mindsets. And, again, as we said, we have to act as if this is happening here, and we have to have very clear procedures in place.
So let's take a look at Ofsted. Ofsted did a review on sexual violence and sexual harassment on there, and they revealed how prevalent sexual harassment and online sexual abuse is for children and young people, and that the issues are so widespread that they need addressing for all children and young people. Nationally collected statistics show us that there has been a sharp increase in reporting of child sexual abuse to the police in recent years. Figures that include all child sexual abuse cases show that police recorded over 83,000 child sexual abuse offences, which is also including in obscene publications in the year ending March 2020. I thought it'd be important just to go on because I thought just talk about a little bit about sexual assault, because some people think that sexual assault is somewhere quite high up in the threshold of sexual offences. But I just want to break down what sexual assault actually is. So these are the points to prove for sexual assault. So a sexual assault is a person commits the offence if he or she intentionally touches another person. That touching is sexual. So on a girl, anywhere around the buttocks, the groin, top of the thighs, around the chest area, a forced kiss, that would be seen as sexual. In a boy, yeah, anywhere around the bottom, the groin, tops of the thighs, a forced kiss, that would be sexual in a boy. The person being touched doesn't consent to being touched, and the person doing the touching doesn't reasonably believe that that person has consented. So that is kind of where sexual assault comes into it. So if a boy, for instance, was to walk up behind a girl and smack her backside and laugh, yeah, that is a sexual assault. He intentionally did it. The touching is sexual. She doesn't consent to it, and he doesn't really think she's consented to it on there. So again, just so to make you aware of the actual offence of sexual assault. And when we start talking about consent, this is the legal definition of consent. So a person can only consent if he or she agrees by choice and has the freedom and capacity to make that choice. So if you're coerced or blackmailed or threatened, that's not freedom of choice. If you've taken drugs, alcohol, or you have a mental health condition, you may not have the capacity to make that choice. And again, I just thought it was important to look at the under 13s. Under 13s can't consent to any sexual activity. The age of consent in this country is 16. Sexual intercourse without consent is rape. Making and sharing sexual images of under 18s is illegal.
So all staff should be aware of the importance of, and again, we have touched on this already, but that sexual violence and sexual harassment is never acceptable and it will not be tolerated. It's especially important not to pass off any sexual violence or sexual harassment as banter, just having a laugh, part of growing up, or boys being boys, as this can lead to a culture of unacceptable behaviours and an unsafe environment for children. Dismissing or tolerating such behaviours risks normalising them, and this is why educating our children from a young age in an age-appropriate way is so important. So with examples of harmful sexual behaviours, touching the genitals of other young people, forcing others into sexual activity, exposing themselves or masturbating in public, sexually explicit talk to or touching of younger children. It's vital for professionals to distinguish normal behaviour from abnormal sexual behaviours. A child's sexual behaviour should be considered abnormal if it occurs at a frequency greater than what would be developmentally expected, if it interferes with the child's development, if it occurs with coercion, intimidation or force, if it's associated with emotional distress, if it occurs between children of divergent ages or developmental abilities, if it's repeatedly reoccurs in secrecy after intervention by caregivers. And we just refer to here Hackett's continuum of sexual behaviour, and really there's just 5 categories to consider, and that's normal, inappropriate, problematic, abusive and violent, and you've got examples under each listed there.
So let's look at an immediate response then. So children may well not directly verbalise their abuse to adults. It may be shown in their behaviour, information may come from a friend, or it may be overheard in a conversation.
Okay, so the immediate response, so important that the voice of the child is heard. So listening carefully to the child, reflecting back using the child's language, being non-judgmental, be clear about boundaries, give information about how the report will be progressed, don't ask leading questions, Only prompt the child when necessary using open questions like where, when, what, etc. How the report is dealt with will affect whether others will come forward in the future, and this is so important. If a child doesn't feel they are being taken seriously or listened to, it's very unlikely that they will open up again. A child is likely to report to someone they trust, and it could be anyone. It could also come at any time. Victims must not feel like they're a nuisance for reporting their concerns. They need to feel listened to and that they're taken seriously. A written report is essential. Record only the facts as reported to you by the child in the words that the child uses. Report to the school's designated safeguarding lead. The DSL will then review the report and carry out a risk and needs assessment and take the necessary advice. The designated safeguarding lead will consider the wishes of the victim, the nature of the alleged incident, ages of the children involved, the developmental stages of the children involved, any power imbalance between the children, whether this is a one-off or a sustained pattern of behaviour, any ongoing risk to others, children or staff, any potential links to sexual abuse or exploitation. I think it links in, we already said about the importance of educating our children with regards to these sensitive issues. Obviously, we've got the relationships education, relationships and sex education and health education curriculum, and schools should teach pupils the knowledge they need to recognise and to report abuse, including emotional, physical and sexual abuse. In primary schools, this can be delivered by focusing on boundaries and privacy, ensuring young people understand that they have rights over their own bodies. Caring friendships, pupils should know how to recognise who to trust and who not to trust, how to judge when a friendship is making them feel unhappy or uncomfortable. Respectful relationships, pupils should know the importance of permission seeking and giving in relationships with friends, peers and adults. Online relationships, pupils should know that the same principles apply to online relationships as to face-to-face relationships, including the importance of respect for other online. Being safe, pupils should know that each person's body belongs to them and the differences between appropriate and inappropriate or unsafe physical and other contact.
So as we can see, lots of information there on peer and peer abuse. And peer and peer abuse is just one of those categories that come under the larger umbrella of safeguarding. So when we think about safeguarding, peer and peer abuse, harmful sexual behaviours, these are the reminders that we must respect when we're speaking to our children. Always remember the child and look beyond their behaviour and consider why they are behaving like this, because there may be some underlying fact that something's going on in their lives that we don't know about. Always listen to what the child is telling you. Make a record of what the child has said as soon as possible, and don't dismiss what the child tells you. And when you're writing the report down, it's very important to use the words that the child is using and don't try and assume what they're meaning. So use the words the child uses. Be professionally curious. If that situation doesn't look or feel right to you, then it probably isn't. We all have that gut instinct, don't we? Let's not ignore it. If in doubt, always seek advice and support. That could be from your team manager, your line manager, your designated safeguarding leads, or one of their deputies. Share that information with the people concerned, in your organization, generally your designated safeguarding lead. And always share with your manager as well if you have a concern regarding another colleague's behavior towards your child, because that's really quite important.
Remember, it could happen here. Always act in the best interests of the child.
And a reminder again of those key documents that are out there. Okay, again, all accessible on the .gov UK website, and always ensure that you're reading the most up-to-date version of these documents.
Okay, thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the bite-size instalment. Please look out for the next instalment, which will be available just before the Christmas break, and that will be on low-level concerns. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.